Welcome everybody. So, as Barbara mentioned, we are all members of the team at the Quad Preparatory School. We're all representing divisional leadership. I am the lower school clinical director and interim director of clinical affairs, so working across the school. The rest of the team will introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Nancy Tarshish. I am the Director of Early Childhood Programming.
Hi, I'm Nicole Cavaliere. I am the lower school curriculum coordinator and Director of Talent Development.
Can't hear you, Lisa.
Oh, there you go, Lisa.
Okay, thanks. Hi, I'm Lisa Marfleet. I'm the Director of Talent Development and College Counseling and the Upper School Coordinator for our community partnerships.
Great. We're going to move on to our next slide. So this is kind of an overview of our program and presentation for today. So we've all found ourselves in this unexpected time of online learning, and at Quad Prep we found that aspects of our program that we regularly have allowed for a successful transition during this time. Our regular programming offers both academic instruction and clinical services, which we are continuing to provide during this time and remain true to our integrated model. We're going to discuss more what this integrated model means, how other schools can use these programmatic aspects during this time of online learning, and we're going to share some concrete examples that pertain to each of our divisions throughout the school. So the first part of our programming that we found to be an opportunity during this time is that our program is inherently strength-based. This is what hooks our students into engaging in learning. They have a very unique and a wide range of strengths. So this is often how we can engage our students in very deep learning. This is an important area to focus on during this time of remote instruction in order to maintain engagement for students. It's a very tricky time for everybody, so getting them hooked on something that they can already feel successful at is something that can be beneficial. So we're going to go through some examples for each of our divisions.
Nancy, you're muted. Nope, still muted.
Muted.
There you go.
Okay, great. So in the early childhood program, even before this happened, what we discovered is that a lot of the units that we work on are kind of organically derived from child interest. An example is recycling. We had a child in our kindergarten class last year who was particularly interested in the process of recycling, starting with a plastic bottle, going all the way through recycling, ending up with yet another item made of plastic. I'm very sure this child is going to be a systems analyst when he grows up. But I think that's a great example because what we discovered is that a lot of our kids have these very deep interests. And so moving to the online platform actually allowed for computer use and research in a way between teachers and students in a way that allowed teachers to bring video and bring technology into the classroom, something we don't always do in the early childhood program, partially because it's a very play-based it's a very play-based academic program that we run, literacy and play. So it's given us kind of an interesting shift in our ability to really follow kids' interests out. So right now they're very interested in tall buildings. So as part of their off-screen time with their parents, they're taking virtual trips to their favorite monument or favorite tall building and coming back and reporting on it to their peers. Nicole?
Similarly, in the lower school, a lot of our students engage in a lot of project-based learning, which has taken a shift, obviously, to a digital model, but we're still able to bring in a lot of those same things that Nancy was just discussing. So for instance, in our investigative social studies classes right now, some of our fifth graders are moving into their African geography and culture study. So rather than kind of the entire class studying one thing, the way our model works really lends itself to the students being able to study what they really want to study. And in that unit, there are a lot of students who are either, choosing a specific country to study, choosing a specific area of study within African culture in general. We have a few students who are very active in their own outside music programs, dance programs. A lot of our students, I'm thinking of one student in particular who just loves food and loves exploring food. So he's able to kind of explore Africa and African culture through food and do some of that research. So allowing our students to continue completing a lot of these projects through their online research, and then in turn being able to present in the same way that we're presenting today, and having them being able to present their own studies. Within those students, they're really able to give a breadth of knowledge to each other, which is a really nice way for them to explore. Lisa, you're also muted. Still muted?
I'm muted.
All right, there you go. No, you're muted again.
I on my end, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
now you're good.
Okay, thank you. So in the upper school, and primarily my focus is on talent development and how that integrates into everything that we do. So a couple of areas and some specific examples: career research and exploration, which is the focus of every aspect of talent development for our kids, including any curricular extensions, any outside resources that we're bringing into the school, any resources they're utilizing during independent studies, has to do with personalized research in terms of an area that they're interested in. It also has to do with an independent study project that a student might have been doing in school that they can continue to do at home. Some specific examples of that is we have students who are interested in video game design who are utilizing RIT's online game design program, which is a course-by-course program, relatively inexpensive and accessible. It's about 3 hours of work per week. We have students some of our students who may not necessarily be college-bound. We have a partnership with Divergent, which is a tech company that hires students on the spectrum to do remote work for them. Those students are able to use their online job training program and work on that, and then the tasks themselves that they do are online. We have other students who have independent studies that they're doing when we're in school in a building. For an example, a student who's working on an independent study in historical costume reproduction. So while she can't exactly sew online, she can certainly go into, for example, RISD's archives and look at some of the garments that have been constructed by some of their alum. We also have students right now who are, and hopefully there will be summer programs and things will be open, who are actively applying for, Cooper Union's summer STEM program, and their application mimics a college application. So all the steps that we would go through one-on-one in person, we can simply go through online. It's an online application. They're submitting teacher recommendation letters. They're writing short essay responses. And then for some of the younger students, the middle school students, it gives them a chance to take some ownership of the career research process for themselves, so they can, we can discuss by Zoom some of the areas they're interested in. They can go off for a week and come back with, these are 4 programs I found: the landscape architecture program at Bronx Botanical Garden, etc. And then we can talk about what that is, and we can start the process online, which is really no different than it would be if we were in school, since so much of it is online anyway. But leading from their strengths and utilizing the screen time is pretty much what we do. So it's an easy transition in that way for what I do with them.
The next opportunity that we found in this transition time has been that personalized learning is easy to convert to online. Kind of going off of what Lisa was just saying, some things are easy in that sense when it's so personalized for students. So in order to address our students' unique strengths, as well as some asynchronies in learning that they may have, our model includes learning in small groups and one-on-one. So we found that, managing and attending to large groups of students in online forums presents a challenge, not only for the educators, but also for the students, to manage that many people on a screen or attending when there are different things going on. So we've transitioned our small group and one-on-one learning to the online model as well. So that's something that programs could consider, is breaking out into those smaller groups. And the mindset may be, if a program is able to, the quality of that time rather than the quantity of time that's spent online.
So I think the best thing I can do is give you an example of what the day looks like in our early childhood program. So what's going on for us is all the kids come to their classroom at 8:30 in the morning, and we start our day with morning meeting the way we do at school. We just use the teacher shares a screen, and we do the calendar and the weather and all of the things that one would do in an early childhood classroom. And then there's the question of the day, and there's discussion. We think this is incredibly important because social emotional is such a key aspect of our program across the school that we really want to make sure that we're maintaining social contact. And there's a lot of opportunity to talk about the difference between what does social look like when you are on a screen versus when you are in person, what's expected, what's different. So we go through that, and then throughout the course of the time they're online, and our early childhood program is online, in different groupings from 8:30 until 12:30, and they have small group ELA, they have small group math sessions in breakout rooms, sometimes they have 2 or 3 kids, sometimes they're working one-on-one with a teacher. It mirrors what we actually did at the school. We've been able to recreate that in a lot of ways. Continuing in the afternoons, our speech pathologist is running play dates so that the kids are having they're doing their social groups and their social interactions, because it's very important to us that during this time, the kids maintain their interactions with other kids and other adults and teachers, because life has gotten very narrow for most of us.
Yeah, and I think that in the lower school, we've tried to do really the same thing, where a lot of our day mirrors exactly what would be happening in the classroom anyway, which I think has brought a real ease to our students. It hasn't been such a big shift where they feel like, not only am I only learning online, but everything is so different from when I was in school. So in the lower school classrooms, we are grouped in small groups for their learning. And then during that time when they are grouped, let's say in a math lesson, we utilize the breakout rooms often to really provide that one-to-one academic time, which allows students to really grow at their own academic pace while still being a part of that group, and making sure that, as Nancy said, that they're really still getting that social aspect of learning as well. So pairing those together and making sure that our head teachers and our associate teachers are able to support the students in their breakout rooms. And along with that, really providing them with individual assignments. It's very rare that any of our students are really working on the exact same material at the exact same time. So having those flexible work times, having those flexible assignments, and being able to utilize that breakout room feature has been really beneficial for us. And it allows the students, again, to feel like they're still in school, where normally they would be in their small group lesson for math, but they know that they would get to see their math teacher one-on-one. So by utilizing those rooms, we're still able to maintain that online.
I would echo that as well, what Nancy and Nicole said. Because the upper school, we work in small group seminars anyway. Our largest seminar is probably 6 students, and every student is meeting 3 times a week with their teacher, and also then has a one-on-one session that's relatively easy to replicate online. We are starting the day with homeroom. We do have end of the day check-in. We have some students having lunch together online. We have instituted some of our upper school clubs online. So if we, for example, if we have 2 physics dyads, that would happen in the building and as 2 dyads, it's easy to replicate that online. And if you have a session of 5 or 6 students for an algebra class, it's also easy to utilize the breakout room so that the students can then work in smaller groups. But because students are already working in small personalized groups in school, and none of our classes goes beyond 6 students, it's relatively easy to transition over to that. And again, we're trying to replicate the format of the day and both the social aspects as well as the academic aspects, so that it's a balance between not too much screen time, but as close to e-school as we can replicate at the upper school level.
So another opportunity that we found is that social, emotional, and executive functioning learning don't need to halt. We, as part of our program, social, emotional, and executive functioning supports are regularly provided to all of our students. And of course, they need to be adapted for the online learning world, but we haven't gotten rid of them. And we found that there are some opportunities for enhanced learning in those areas through like technology that's been available. And in some cases, it's also been an opportunity for students to practice some of those social, emotional, or executive functioning skills they've been learning with a little bit more independence. We're not leaving them to just practice them on their own, but it's been a nice opportunity for some students to have that practice time during the new situation that we found ourselves in.
Emily gives a great example, because one of the things that we are working on in the early childhood program is giving them these social opportunities. And, it took a second to think through how we would be able to accomplish that. But what we discovered with our kids is it's really quite interesting, because for us, social is a conversation. For us, social is something that is very front and center and always being talked about. And it's given us a really meta opportunity, if you will, with our kids, because we really are talking about things like, well, what's different when you're online? Raising your hand, for instance, waiting your turn, using the mute feature has been kind of interesting, because we're able to kind of help our kids with this transition. And one of the interesting things that we've discovered in the early childhood program is the formality, if you will, of the Zoom feature, and having to raise your hand and have an opportunity, because if everybody talks, nobody can hear each other, has given our kids almost an opportunity to step up their skill set in a very different way. It'll be very interesting for us to see how that translates when we get back into a classroom.
Definitely. I think that comes up a lot in the lower school as well, where our students are really practicing a lot of these skills in such a different way. I had a conversation with a parent last week who said something that I've noticed is that my child is no longer kind of walking away from a conversation because they realize that the conversation is on this screen. So leaving the screen, whereas it might look different in a classroom when you walk away from a student, the student is still in the general area. When you walk away from the screen, the person you're talking to isn't necessarily in that same area with you anymore. So in the same way, really thinking about their learning and their attention and their engagement with the material that's on the screen when we are sharing screens for a lesson or doing some direct instruction. Something that we've built in a lot is really working a lot of gaming and a lot of interaction into the lessons, which has really helped the students work on their executive functioning just on the screen. We've noticed that the lower school students in particular have been more able than I think we realize to follow their own schedule and to follow their own Google Docs and organize themselves in this digital way. So really presenting the information clearly to them and giving them a structure around following their own schedule has helped very much. And along with that, you know, really thinking about the way that they interact with others, we've also brought in to their academics a lot of guest speakers. There's a classroom that does kind of a Friday science guest speaker, and that has helped a lot as well. Again, as Nancy was saying, to raise the silent hand, to make sure that everyone's thoughts are getting heard and everyone's questions are getting answered.
I would use the example similar to what Nancy said in terms of utilizing sort of the inevitable focus of Zoom to reinforce what we're really trying to work at when we're at school. I'll use the example of our self-advocacy session, which is part of our Cloverleaf transitional program, where we're meeting in 5 different groups a week, small seminars. And the focus in various areas is advocating for yourself within a group, which of course has to do with listening well, and active listening, and responding in kind, which you have to pay particular attention to in a Zoom meeting. As Nancy mentioned, if everyone talks at once, it's completely counterproductive. But also, listening has a different component in terms of a Zoom meeting. Being able to focus in a way that you can then ask a question right then when it's your turn, as opposed to all wander out and come back into the room. And since the essence of the seminar is the ability to interact in a group setting and advocate for yourself, the format itself lends itself to the lesson of the seminar, which is to use your time on screen effectively and compassionately. And also, if you want to continue online with a Zoom meeting, you really do have to pay attention to the format, or it's simply not successful logistically.
Right.
So another thing that we found very important during this time is to take care of our community. You know, independent schools already have, you know, such strong communities. And if anything, this has just reminded us of, you know, the importance of that community. So everyone's navigating this together. Everyone's experiencing this time differently. And so being aware of that, you know, we've implemented supports for technology for those who may, it may be more newer venture for, as well as guidelines surrounding how technology should be used across our school, across our staff, and with families. This has helped us, you know, decrease confusion and just have one cohesive model that we're following. We've also found ways to, you know, recognize just the odd nature of the times that we're in through, you know, staff and parent check-ins. And all of these things apply to everyone in the community, the staff, the students, and the families. So we're trying to keep everybody connected and checking in with everyone during this time. One component of our program, our regular program that has really helped us in this time is that across all of our divisions, we have monthly phone calls with the families set up from the start of the school year. And this includes families, outside providers if they'd like to invite them, anyone who's working on a child's team. And so having this standing meeting already allows for a lot of communication. So now that we're in this platform where we have to be in a lot more communication with families, it's not a sudden change. They're already used to really getting a lot of information from us and vice versa. So that's helped us during this time as well.
And so, you know, in the early childhood program, we often have a lot of contact with parents. As Emily said, in addition to those monthly meetings, my co-director and I, we host parent meetings almost once a month, topically based parent meetings where, you know, how to have a successful play date and what does it mean to, how does social cognitive challenges impact academics, and, you know, kind of informational meetings, and also just discussion groups. And what we discovered very quickly is this is really hard. This is really hard on us. It's really hard on our staffs. It's incredibly hard on our families. I mean, here they are, they're home trying to do their jobs. and also help their child through the day. And it's a lot of competing interests. So immediately we started running parent meetings. The first week we had 5, the second week we had 4. They're dwindling as parents are getting ready, but we're still hosting 2 to 3 meetings a week, just giving the parents an opportunity to talk to each other, to talk to us, because we are a very responsive program across the school. We've made a lot of changes from what we were doing week 1 to what it looked like last Friday, in terms of sort of how the day went. We really listened to the parents. We watched how the kids were doing. And day 1 was, as I said, completely different than last Friday. Because we're light on our feet, because I have to say, and I'm sure Nicole and Lisa feel the same way, because we have the most phenomenal staff. We say, gee, do you think you could do this? And, you know, immediately they've got 16 ideas about how they could make that happen, and ideas we haven't even thought of. So we're really trying to take care of our community in the sense of being responsive to kids, responsive to parents, also responsive to staff. Sometimes parents are requesting things that are a lot, and we have to put up the brakes and say, you know, not really sure we can make that happen. So we're, you know, balancing everybody's needs.
I think what Nancy said is exactly right. You know, really finding a way to balance what everyone needs during this time, and the balance of the wants as well. I think Nancy pointed that out beautifully. I think in addition to the parent meetings, as both Nancy and Emily stated, we do that all of the time anyway. So I wanted to highlight a little bit about what we're doing in the lower school in terms of supporting the students outside of their academic times as well. We're really providing them with a lot of open office hours in between classes. You know, they do have things like their snack social period every day where they're able to meet with their teachers and their classmates as well and have some of that social time. Last week we did something similar with the parents where we did kind of a parent social time, and we met with the parents and heard from them as well. But during the day, when students do have an independent work period where they have assignments that they're expected to complete, we're providing them with open office hours, access to their teachers, access to be able to ask independent questions and really check in a way that is a little bit different from what they might be able to do at school. And it's worked out really well online. I think that they really enjoy being able to say, you know, oh, I'm doing this project independently, but I have this question about it, and I know that I can call my teacher right now and ask that question and then go back to working independently.
I would follow up as well with what Nicole said, and then I wanted to read, because it's something that Nancy had brought up, is that, and this is unusual for our students, I think, in that during the day, they're not obviously plugged into email where they're responding to their teachers by email. So for some of the upper school students, the notion that they can actually email any teacher or a staff member at any point and get an almost immediate response, I think is both reassuring and kind of lovely, because that's not, you don't have to do that in school, right? You can just check in person. But so we're trying to stress that really they will get an immediate, pretty much an immediate answer, and that is an absolutely justifiable and perfect way to communicate during the day. In terms of making adjustments from when we started to where we are now, in the upper school, the last period of the day is usually a supported work period. And we found that in the beginning, that seemed a little bit too much of a passive activity online. And instead we used the time at the end of the day for an end of the day check-in, which was really helpful when we could meet in small seminar groups with kids, just to talk about, you know, what's it like to go to school online, the fact that the boundary between school and work has now been dissolved. And a lot of the upper school students talked about that. Well, now my school is in my house and it's all the same thing, and how to find a way to be distinct about that. Now I'm working, now I'm relaxing. A little more logistically, we've had some students who've had, 1 or 2 students who've had issues with eye strain after being in a video lesson, and we were able to say, you know, you can have an audio lesson and participate in the same way. Some students, especially some of the upper level math students who are doing advanced math, found that they enjoy doing math still by hand, and they wanted to know if they could do math by hand on a piece of paper and, you know, take a photo and send it that way, which is of course completely doable. So to be as responsive as possible, to whatever little adjustments we can make, especially for students who may feel like it's a lot of screen time.
Could I interrupt for a couple of questions at this point? If that's all right. This is Barbara Swanson. And there have been a few questions in the chat that I think might it might help to clarify some of these before we go too much further.
Sure.
One is class size. How many kids are together? I know what someone said about 6, but
Yes.
if that's
More than that.
true.
So in our early,
Sorry.
In early childhood and lower school classes are groups of 10 with breakouts that are, somewhere from maybe 2 to 6 students. And then in our upper school classes or cohorts are like 12 to 16 students, and they break out again in a little bit larger groups, like 4 to 6 students.
Great. And another question about the balance of synchronous and asynchronous. What is the balance?
I think it's different in the different divisions, partially. In the early childhood program, we're providing 4 hours a day of synchronous online. Teachers are there, with 10, 15-minute breaks or something but they're getting continuous synchronous work. And then in the afternoon, there's a little bit more time with one or another or a couple of teachers in small groups, individually, one-to-one. So they're getting a lot of synchronous content in the early childhood program, which I think is a little different.
And what about the 2nd to 5th grade?
So in the lower school, I think it is a balance. We do a lot of both, and we really tailor it to what's working best for the students. I think we're finding that some of our younger students really need more synchronous time with their teachers, and as they grow through the lower school, they're really able to complete more of that independent work. I think in our specials as well, which we're also still running, we are still having art class, music class, applied computing and engineering, movement classes. And I think a lot of that is happening in a really unique way where some of our students are able to participate in the arts really right on the screen in the same way they are with their academics. And others have really benefited from just having the access to independent work. So for instance, our art teacher does some one-to-one classes with students who really benefit from sitting there and completing the work together in a more collaborative space, whereas some of the students really enjoy doing their art on their own, and she's able to provide prompts and things in that way.
I would say in the upper school, we are adhering, very closely to the actual schedule of the school day. So in that sense, it is replicating the school day for every student, with the caveat that because everything we do has an individualized approach, that may be that particular day in math class, there's going to be 2 breakout sessions, and they're going to have, that's how they're going to work that day. Or somebody may go off and work on an independent project, but we are pretty much consistently keeping to the schedule so that it is a full school day, it is full e-school, and students are following the same schedule that they would as if they were in the building.
Thanks so much.
I think I think one other thing I want to add is that I think what Lisa said of mirroring the school day, so that much like the school day, we try to, in our younger students, we often front load more of what would be considered strictly academic work in the morning, because that's when they're fresh and ready and really able to do that. I should also mention that all of our kids are also engaged in offline work in the afternoons. They're working on different app programs that are teacher monitored. So the teachers have set up accounts across spelling, math, writing, reading, all of those things. So they're also doing that work quasi-independently on apps, and teachers are monitoring, shifting programs, making sure that they're working in the right sections. So
Yeah, and I think in the lower school, it's similar. You know, we are following our regular day-to-day schedule, and there's all these other things built into that as well. So the students do follow the exact same thing that they would be following during the day. And it's during kind of those independent periods where they would, in school, it might be a tutorial period where they're independently working on projects with access to their teachers. We're providing that same thing in a digital way.
One quick question, and then I'm sure you want to move on. And that's, one of you just mentioned that there are certain apps that you use for the kids to submit work. So what are those? If you could.
In the early childhood program, we're using Teachly Connect, and we're using Nessie for reading. We're using let me just think for us, Seesaw for submitting work so that teachers can monitor what they're doing. So Seesaw is kind of like a portfolio gathering kind of program. So kids are able to upload, take photographs and upload work.
Yeah, at the lower school, it really varies. We have a list that just goes on and on and on of all the different apps and of all the different resources that are available to both our teachers and our parents right now. But I think for the most part, because the students' schedules are in Google, a lot of them are submitting work either through Google Docs or they're creating Google slide presentations and doing work in that way.
Right.
And, you know, before we move on, I also want to say, you know, we're very lucky in that our model is already tailored to small group learning. Like we mentioned, our class sizes are around 10 students, and then we break out even farther. So we recognize that all schools don't have that model, but, you know, the point being that there is an opportunity to break into smaller groups, which would likely still be larger than our groups. But that opportunity is there with some of these online platforms to, you know, and engage students in some of that meaningful learning.
Great. And would you be willing to share that list of resources and apps with us at the end? Offline? I mean, offline, you can send them to me and I'll get them.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think through the chat, that's going to be really hard, but.
No, not in the chat, not in the chat. Afterwards. And then I'll be able to send them to everybody who was here on this call.
I was also going to add, from a non-academic student setting, that we're still continuing. We dismiss half day on Friday, and we have staff meetings on Friday by division and by prep, and we cannot talk about every student every Friday, but we're continuing to do that as well through Zoom, so that Friday continues to be a half day, and we're all still meeting online. And you know how that process goes when we're in the building is, you know, there's several students who are up for discussion that week, and both clinicians and teachers are meeting in one place to discuss what the last week has been like, and that continues even though we're remote, and that's relatively easy to replicate that discussion online.
I think I would like to answer the question about why the early childhood program is a half day as opposed to the older. It's not a half day where they're done learning. It's a half day where they are done with certain aspects of the academic program. In the afternoon, as I said, may not have been heard, we're actually, our speech pathologist is running social groups. She's doing tailored play groups. We are doing, we run a very particular kind of program where we are working on interactive pretend play, which you're all educators, you know, is what supports literacy and reading comprehension. And so we're running an afternoon program, even at school, where kids are really working on play, because play is difficult for a lot of our students. So we're extending our literacy program because we bring the literacy into the play that we're working on. And so our speech pathologist, as I said, is still engaged in the afternoons online with 2 students typically. We've made the groups a little smaller to make it easier online. And so they're actually working on that in the afternoons, as well as some of their other individual clinical needs.
I was also going to mention in the upper school, any counseling sessions that students have are also being replicated online. That includes college, counseling one-on-one sessions, any sessions that students have with their mental health counselor. All of that all of that continues. It is not changed from what it would be if they were in school.
In the lower school as well, I think across the board, all of the services are still being held. Students are still having FaceTime with all the people that they would have FaceTime with during the regular school day.
Right.
Okay. So as you know, has been clear through some of our other slides and answers that, you know, we are trying to provide structure, but also be flexible. And that's just one of the inherent things about our program. They're both very key components. Our students really thrive on structure, but also require that personalized plan in order to access their learning. So taking away structure later is always easier than having less in the beginning and needing to add on more. By having that structure from the get-go, then we can personalize and ease back on it as needed. And, you know, since the founding of our program, our ethos at Quad Prep has been not if, but how. So that already sets out the expectation for all members of our community that structure is in place in order to make everyone involved successful, but we recognize the need to adapt when it's necessary.
So I think the best way to talk about this is to talk about some of the individual kids and the examples, because we've had to make very individualized programs for certain kids. One example is we have a set of parents. The father is a doctor. He is, the first week we were up and running, they were home and working with their child, and it was all going well, and he was off. And mom was there helping the older child, and he was able to work with the younger child, but he has been called to the front line. He let us know that was going to be happening, and therefore there wouldn't be anybody to work with their 5-year-old on managing Zoom, on managing the platform, on being able to do that. So we've had to be really flexible. They asked us, could we create some asynchronous content? Could we provide some individualized work for them to do, for mom really to do with him when the older child was not in Zoom at another school? So we've had to be flexible and create a completely independent program just for that child and this family. We have kids who just can't tolerate this much time in front of a screen. One child said it was making him dizzy. So literally that child has very particular times that he tunes in and tunes out of the program. So, you know, we really had to adjust ourselves to the needs of the learners in the way we always do. So this is no different for us. It's just a different platform. It's now online as opposed to in person, but it's an ever flexible system.
I agree. And I think that a lot of our flexibility comes not from changing the expectations of the students, but really changing how they meet those expectations. So whether that be, you know, changing it from synchronous learning to asynchronous learning, whether that be from completing work during the regular school day or completing some homework, I think depending on not only the learner, but the families as well, as Nancy was saying, we've really had to adjust to that parent feedback and say a lot of our students, you know, do have a hard time sitting in front of a screen for that long. So it may be that they've worked in a little bit shorter class schedule to be able to allow for a 5-minute movement break at the end of class. So just putting in those minor adjustments has really helped. And again, holding the students to the same expectations that they would have in class, but just being a little more flexible on how they're meeting those expectations and what we can do to support them in meeting those expectations.
Agreed. It's really not that, it's not incredibly different than anything that we do every day, except that the platform is different. And again, off academic slightly, some of the sessions that I've had this last week have been with 2 students who are very focused on a job search. They were interested in writing a resume. They were interested in looking at job listings. One of them is passionate about finding a job in a sushi restaurant. So we are able to take that process, which would have been, you know, one-on-one in person, and replicate that online. online, even if he goes off and works for 10 minutes and then we meet again, and to look at the same, we can screen share, look at the same job listings online, create a resume. This is all with the caveat, of course, that no one quite knows what the job market would be like, but it also is an impromptu chance to have a conversation about economics and the changing state of the job market, which is something our students are interested in talking about if they're 17 or 18 and they're thinking ahead and they read current events. So being able to use the unusual and situation, you know, as a learning moment, if you will, but to make sure that those things that they really enjoy during the day that are aside from their core subjects aren't lost, and we can replicate the process in which we'd work on them in school online.
Great. So we can open up to questions. I saw one come through about attendance. So our attendance is just as it is when we're in school. All of our classroom teachers take attendance and then pass it on to a centralized system with our admin team. So it's the same as it has been as when we're in school. We're also, you know, taking steps to ensure that we're documenting what student learning is happening during this online time. So the students have individual schedules on a shared document that have, you know, their class, the teacher that they're with, links to the work that they're doing so that it can be easily accessed later, and things like that that can help document everything that is being done in this time and that it is, you know, replicating our regular school day.
And in terms of individual services, our service providers, our speech pathologists, the OT, all of them are just the way they do in person, are documenting the work, documenting progress, tracking goals, keeping data. All of this stuff can happen online the same way it happens in person. So we have all of that.
And for our academic teachers, a lot of our teachers, all of our teachers at the lower school have individual portfolios for the students. So any work that they complete that is exceptional, or that students are really proud of, or that we need to really show growth and things like that, those are all documented within the student's individual portfolio, as well as being reflected on each child's individual schedule with a link to the work that's being completed or the individual assignment.
Ditto in the upper school, the portfolio, you know, documentation continues, and it's very easy to replicate that, and that any work that's unusual, outstanding, consistent, that can be documented in the student's portfolio in the same way it would be if they were at school.
Also in the early childhood program, we've asked a lot of our parents. We have a shared Google Drive. And parents are taking photographs of things and sending them in, putting them, documenting, you know, we're documenting work. We're getting creative about ways that we can see what kids are doing.
I just saw this question come through, if we use Seesaw for portfolios. Generally, our portfolios that Nicole was referencing are for our, like a Google Drive folder where we can upload work. But as Nancy mentioned, Seesaw is being used now for our early childhood program.
Purely since the online platform.
I wonder if that's something you will continue to use after we all go back to school in bricks and mortar.
I think we're going to have to look at it and compare it to what we have in the drive. I don't know that I have an answer for that yet, because I don't think we have enough time to judge whether we're actually documenting in a way that we think is useful enough.
In terms of, you know, so related services that Nancy alluded to, we're also, we can also pull students into a breakout session to reinforce some of those skills. You know, our related service providers are integrating into other parts of the day, not just the sessions. That's also a part of our model, is that they're not only in sessions where they pull out students, but they integrate into other classes to provide that extra support and generally generalization of skills. So those breakout sessions are, used for a variety of purposes, but wanted to mention that's also another use that they've been helpful for.
I notice a question about teachers with young children. Our occupational therapist has an 8-month-old baby, and she's tag team parenting with her husband. That's really what's happening, and they're kind of working through that schedule. She has that luxury. I don't know that every family does.
Something I've seen at the lower school as well, where we do have a few people who have young children at home, is utilizing the other people in the classroom as well. So it's very often that the head teacher or the associate teacher, whoever kind of has a noise issue in the background, may mute themselves and have somebody kind of take over for a small portion while they're still on screen to just avoid the background noise. I've seen that used as well. And then they're able to unmute and mute themselves to give the instruction or to teach the lesson and then come back to it and things like that.
Right, because we don't have just one adult in the room with teachers, it's much easier to do that. We have psychosocial assistants, we have associate teachers, we have head teachers. So if one adult at that moment is indisposed for a personal reason and needs to step away from the screen for a few minutes, it doesn't leave a group of students, on their own in the Zoom meeting. We always have, multiple participants.
So it looks like somebody was asking about the early childhood program and establishing rules. It's a perfect opportunity for us to kind of extend the social emotional learning. We started almost from day one with the kids talking about what's expected in online learning. And the kids generated, we used the whiteboard feature in Zoom, and we had an opportunity to have a class discussion, and the teacher was typing out what the kids were saying, and kind of, not that the kids got to vote on the rules, but the kids kind of got to say which were the most important, which were less important. And, just the way we would at school, we talked a lot about how our behavior online impacts other people. Today, I was doing a read aloud with one of the classes, and one of the kids put a background behind himself, and at one point he yelled out, "Hey, look, my background looks like poop." And I had to say, wow, I'm having a really hard time reading the book because I feel distracted by that picture. That's all I had to say. The picture came down immediately. They were so hooked into what I was reading. So, we're using our best teaching skills in the same platform. I could have told him to just stop doing that, but then he didn't understand the impact of his behavior. So once I stopped reading, he really likes this book. So that was helpful.
And Nancy, you said something earlier in the presentation about how we have the opportunity to teach those kind of like social skills in another context. And so I know in the lower school, one of our counseling team members developed a visual that has the expectations. At school, we follow a model of, the general community rules are safe, respectful, and responsible. And so they made this version for online learning. So the students have that visual at the top of their schedule. What does that mean now that we are in the online world? And that, there are a variety of things that means, including the backgrounds and very specific things, but there's also general things that translate in both environments.
Yeah, and I think what Nancy pointed out was just right. I see a couple people saying that we're telling kids no backgrounds allowed. There are a lot of settings on Zoom where you can disable things like that. But I think what Nancy pointed out is really right, that, without providing that, well, when your background looks like poop, it's distracting when I'm trying to read this book, and really allowing them to understand kind of where you're coming from in that way. What about the backgrounds is wrong? How come it's disabled? How come I'm muted right now?
Exactly. So much of this is about providing the why for our kids. They're really smart kids. I mean, all kids are smart kids, I get that, but these kids really they need the why because they need to know the impact. And so, as Emily said, we have those rules and they're very important, but we don't just put them up and as a set of classroom rules. We take those rules and we apply them to real life situations as part of an ongoing conversation.
And I think it looks the same across divisions. Lisa, obviously speak for the upper school, but I think at the lower school as well, you know, it really does look pretty similar, even though the visual might be a little more mature and things like that. Really, it's just about following what we set across for the whole school, which, as Emily mentioned, is be respectful, be responsible, be safe. You know, what does it mean to be safe on camera? What does it mean to be responsible with your computer? That's really helped us cut down on a lot of the strange backgrounds being interchanged, strange names being interchanged, annotating the screen in ways that are inappropriate, really just letting them know what it means to be respectful, responsible, and safe online, and how that impacts if they're not, has really been helpful.
And sometimes it's just something logistical as, you know, would it be more or less appropriate to be eating while we're having a session? Yes, you're home and it's easy to eat and the food is accessible, but perhaps we can, you know, have a 5-minute break or a 2-minute break or save that till the end, you know, just what works best for that form. Maybe maybe the crunch is too loud if you're going to eat while we have a school group session, or, you know, can we, whatever, so that the boundary between home and school can still be respected without saying, no, you can't have a drink of water for the next, 40 minutes. But what does that mean when you're crunching on a bowl of cereal on the Zoom platform and the sound is amplified? And, how do you deal with that?
There was a question a little while ago about, having smaller number of staff. And yeah, we recognize, again, this is part of our program that we have that high staff to student ratio, and so have that ability. But we recognize that other programs have that, maybe less teaching staff in a classroom. So, something we've also done is, redeploy staff members who in this online learning time their regular day-to-day isn't as filled as it would have been in the physical school-based setting. So that might need, an admin or somebody who just doesn't have all of their day-to-day things that they're doing, and helping out in that way to ensure the students are getting all of that learning that they need to be.
And for sure in the upper school, even not so much a question of people having too much free time, but each of the, the upper school leadership, we spent some time in the first week or two popping in and observing classes, not as a video presence, but as an audio presence, not mainly just to see if there was any support that was needed, to see how it was working logistically, but just to see how the whole thing was running. And so, we would come early so as to not disrupt the class, not necessarily stay for the whole session. Again, we wouldn't be a video presence. We would be muted. We would be speaking, but the goal was to have, as much backup and support as possible for the teachers in the online classroom, and to just have an extra presence be there. And that can also fill in if it happened to be a class that day where there wasn't either an associate teacher or a psychosocial.
So in terms of, I know we only have like a minute, a lot of our students are working on, social, whether that's because of, challenges with perspective taking or impulsivity. It is something that's inherent within our program. And also going back to, Nancy's earlier comments about setting up students early with that play-based learning that sets them up for some of those academic skills. That's something that we believe in as a school, that will help our students be successful in a variety of environments. So it is an important part of our program.
And I think it happens simultaneously with the academics. I don't think an academic period goes by that we don't address some sort of social understanding during the period. It's not, we do provide a very explicit social cognition class for everybody, but I think so much of it is built into our everyday that it's really a part of their day, not just an island of social.